Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, Tommy Duncan. It is Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And if it is Wednesday night, it is Black
Black
Men
Men
Speak.
Speak. That's right.
Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone.
So let's give a shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, hit the like button so we can get our numbers up. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. And please share. Tell a friend or invite a friend, even better. Tom, what's the topic for tonight and who's our guest?
Our guest needs no introduction, but we would like to present to everyone. We are very excited to have Dr. Umar Johnson with us tonight. Have a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack tonight. Our general topic is saving Black people from Black people. That's the topic of the theme for this evening. So we're going to have a conversation about education, family, economics, and a few other topics. So without further ado, Dr. Umar Johnson, welcome to Black Men Speak.
Welcome.
Hey, we are very excited to have you this
Yes.
night tonight. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off the show. Most of our users, most of our listeners probably know you by name, but they don't know very much about you, the man, and what your mission is. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and what projects you're working on?
Yes, Dr. Umar Ifatunde. I'm a school psychologist, certified school psychologist, doctor of clinical psychology, certified school principal, former school principal, founder of the National Independent Black Parent Association, former Minister of Education for Marcus Garvey's UNIA ACL, currently in the process of renovating four beautiful buildings that we purchased with donations from African family from around the world in Wilmington, Delaware, the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. And in my spare time, as well as in my professional time, I spend most of it trying to educate, empower, and help prepare parents to go into the schools and into the mental health institutions around this country to protect their children from the special education holocaust and the ADHD crisis.
Hey man,
That's a lot.
doing that within a couple of minutes, man. Outstanding. It's interesting you bring that up. My mother, both of my parents were in education. My father was a career teacher, retired probably about 15 some odd years ago. And my mother worked with the Department of Education, originally Health Education and Welfare, back when I was young. And so she would tell me these stories about how a lot of our kids, and especially our young Black men, would be railroaded into the special education class. They would start off beginning in school doing extremely well, and then something
Extremely well.
happened in grammar school, and then all of a sudden, they're in the back of the class. So why don't we start a little bit about what you have learned, what you have studied, what your research has shown you that is happening to our young Black men, and how you got into doing what you're doing now?
Well, if we go back in time to 1954, the United States Supreme Court outlawed the use of race as a prevailing factor in education. And as a result of that, the American society, which is a racist, predominantly white society, they immediately started scrambling to see what new strategy or tactic they could use to re-separate Black kids from white kids, since they can no longer use the category of race. And so, as we know, in 1964, we get the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
The Civil Rights Act once again underscores what the Supreme Court said 10 years prior in 54, but there was still very little change. And the Supreme Court actually created the atmosphere for there to be little change by stating in their desegregation decision that the schools had to desegregate with, quote, all deliberate speed, end quote.
Right.
So there was no timetable put on the school desegregation. So 20 years later, we're now in 1974, and the president of the United States at the time, I think that might have been Richard Nixon,
Yes.
he had signed the uh, Equal Educational Opportunities Act. And this act seemed as if it would seek to guarantee Black children the opportunity to learn next to white children. And so as a result of that act, which was passed on August the 21st of 1974, the U.S. Congress came to the aid of white racist school districts and parents across this country by passing the first special education law. And that was Public Law 94-142, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which gave birth to special ed as we know it. Now, on the surface, when somebody hears that a child with a disability has a right to get a quality education, nothing sounds wrong with that. But for Black children, special ed has been used over its past 46-year-old history as a weapon of miseducation, as a weapon of marginalization, as a weapon of juvenile incarceration, as a weapon of stigmatization, as a weapon for psychiatric medication, and as a weapon of premature extermination and mass incarceration. And so special education became the resegregation law, with the only difference being that they now use the disability as a justification for segregation versus the color of children's skin. And due to the lack of education on the part of Black parents, not understanding how schools operate, not understanding special education law or regular education law, they often end up playing right into the hands of America's public and charter school districts, which has given birth to my career, which is part Pan-Africanist and part educator. So when I travel, I'm obviously trying to raise the consciousness politically, but I'm also trying to raise the consciousness academically and behaviorally and psychologically, so parents can make much better decisions involving our children. The school districts are racist. We know that they want to destroy Black children, but too often we are the accomplice to the crime by making very poor, uninformed decisions. And that's why I spend so much time traveling around the country to teach parents what they need to know.
What does that look like when you mention make uninformed decisions that may hamper or destroy their kids' academic career? And you know, I'm assuming they're doing this unknowingly because they just don't know what they don't know.
They just don't know. Most of the time they don't know. Some parents do know, and they just go along with the system because they're tired of fighting, or just are too stressed out in their own life that they don't have enough energy left to fight appropriately for their children, which is why I'm very disappointed in Black men, because too often these mothers are going into these schools by themselves, fighting for our sons. It's the boys that are catching the hell. The girls are too, but the hell that the boys catch is 50 times worse than the hell that the girls catch. And it's not necessarily the father I'm speaking of, because he may be incarcerated, he may be deceased. But Black men as a population, we should be going into these meetings with our mothers to make sure these schools are not academically lynching our sons, and we're simply not there. You know, even when I offer my Black parent boot camp trainings, which is separate from my lectures and seminars, very few Black men are present to learn how to effectively advocate for our children. So Black men have been missing in action when it comes to fighting back in this war against the miseducation of our children. But to answer your question, to give you an example, I spoke to a mother today. We communicated by text, and she has a second grade son. I forget which state that they're in, but the school wants to evaluate this second grader for dyslexia. And the mother asked me, what should she do? I said, you should not give them permission to evaluate him because, number one, he's only in second grade. He has not been learning long enough for them to even try to insinuate that he has a learning disability. Number two, your son has probably been victimized by poor academic and instructional opportunities. I'm willing to bet that he goes to an underfunded school. Yes. I'm willing to bet he goes to a school that has the worst teachers. I'm willing to bet that he goes to a school that's probably on the state list, okay, for schools with the lowest academic achievement. So why are we punishing the kids? Because the teachers don't know how to teach them. Why are we punishing the kids? Because the schools don't care how to reach them. And so I told this parent, what you need to consider is whether or not your son might need a second year of second grade. And he might need a second year of second grade because he may have not went to a quality daycare. You may have not done much with him academically in the home. And sometimes that's no fault of the mothers because they have to work so many jobs to make ends meet. They're often exhausted and don't have time to help the children with the homework. He may have also not even went to preschool, okay? And there's a good chance he might have not went to kindergarten because kindergarten is not mandatory in most states in America. The point I was trying to get her to see is your son's reading problems are not organic. They are environmental
Yes.
and circumstantial. They're due to what you didn't do. They're due to what the previous teachers didn't do. They're due to what the current teachers are not doing. And they're due to a deprivation of early learning experiences. So I basically told her that you might want to leave them in second grade another year. And why is that? Sometimes I advocate that a child repeat the same grade because I would rather they repeat one grade twice than be in special ed for the rest of their life.
Yes.
I'd
Thank
rather
you.
he do second grade a second time as opposed to be subject to inferior education in the form of special ed all the way through 12th grade, which sets up a very real possibility that he will not graduate on time, if at all.
So and that's a great point. And
Great point.
with mothers being out there, with mothers not knowing what they don't know, unfortunately, and I'll put my opinion in there, with mothers maybe not having received the education from even their mothers as to what they should be doing in raising their child. And unfortunately, in our households, at least 70 to 75% of those are by themselves. You mentioned earlier, fathers not being involved in the picture in most cases. In 75+% of our households, there is no father, either, at least in the household. Some of them may be in the picture, but not in the household. What is it that our mothers need to be more specific, and our mothers are getting younger? And you mentioned fathers not being involved, fathers not being in the meetings, fathers not being involved. What are you saying to those brothers? Because in a lot of cases, culturally speaking, usually the mothers are a little bit more instrumental in the earlier childhood education.
Well, my message would actually be to the men of the community, not necessarily the fathers specifically, because we don't know where the fathers are.
Yes.
They could be incarcerated. They could be deceased. As the African proverb says, it takes a village to raise the child.
Correct.
So my question is always, where is the village? Because we keep hearing about how mothers need to do a better job, but they have to be empowered and supported towards doing a better job.
Yes.
Why isn't the Black church called to task for not supporting our single mothers? Lord knows more than half of our Black educators belong to churches, and they go to church every Sunday. So why aren't Black churches being required by the Black community to have free tutoring programs? They're getting more than enough money.
Yes,
I read
that's
one
true.
statistic that said the Black church every Sunday receives about $3 million a week, I believe, collectively, nationally, $3 million a week. So if we're giving $3 million every weekend to the Black church, and we ain't got no schools for our children, no academic enrichment programs for our children, no guidance and mentorship programs for our boys, then the Black church is a failure. I don't care how much they read from the Bible and teach about Jesus. If you're not concerning yourself about the everyday problems of Black people in the here and now, you are relevant. Whether you're a pastor, a businessman, a politician, a community organization, we are at war, and we are fighting for the lives of our children. And any institution that takes time from Black people, money from Black people, and energy from Black people, and don't give them much in return, is actually an institution that's working on the behalf of our enemies, not on the behalf of our parents.
That's true.
So when you talk about the Black church and the model, do you see any churches out there who are getting it right? And when you consider that the Black church, the pastor in particular, which in a lot of cases, unfortunately, is considered a demigod, God forbid someone were to speak out or try to hold the pastor accountable, how do everyday hardworking people who have been tithing to the church, who have probably been giving more money to the church than maybe
Their 401k,
the government and the taxes, or maybe rent or their mortgage, how does one hold the church or the pastor accountable to that, when in a lot of cases, in a lot of our neighborhoods, the pastors are God or demigod?
Yes, sir. And that's a very good question, because across cultures, people do not feel comfortable holding religious leaders accountable.
Yes, sir.
And that comes from the fact that religious leaders often misrepresent themselves as the mouthpiece of the Lord. And so part of being a good Muslim, part of being a good Christian, part of being a good Jehovah's Witness, an Episcopalian, or a Methodist, part of being a good member of a congregation is to respect leadership. And unfortunately, questioning leadership about what they do with your tithes somehow falls under the umbrella of disrespect. And
Yes.
so a lot of people, especially black people, coming from the strong spiritual tradition we come from, most of us do not feel comfortable asking pastors to be accountable for their political decisions or their financial decisions. And that's why I am a firm advocate that we as a people have to create institutions that are so vital to the needs of black people that they will stop spending as much time in church as they do. So I'm not against church, but I am against black people involving themselves exclusively in any institution that is not serving the needs of the community. And that is to say that once we do what we need to do on the grassroots level, the people will naturally come to us because our people are looking for those who have the solutions. You know, the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, I always tell people that one of the reasons he built the largest black organization in the modern history of African people in the Western Hemisphere is because he did not challenge the church and he did not disrespect the church. He simply started doing what the church was not doing. And that was providing for the needs of the people. Honorable Elijah Muhammad would come in behind Mr. Garvey. Similarly, of course, he used religion, and Marcus Garvey was wise enough not to. But nonetheless, I would have to mention Mr. Muhammad as well in terms of providing our people with those things that the church was not doing. So to make a long story short, the reason why the church is still winning is because the black consciousness community is not doing anything for the grassroots people. We were created to some degree as a reaction to the inactivity of the church, and black consciousness itself has almost become like a separate second church.
Interesting thing about it, Dr. Johnson, is that the black woman is the backbone of the church. They are also the ones who, of course, are raising our children and bring the family together. And so they have the leverage and the power, and they turn the neck of the church, because without them, the money ain't going to be going there. Without them, ain't nothing getting done. So for those sisters who are out there who might be in that position where they were, let's say the traditional Baptist church, where it was very taboo to say anything against the pastor, what is it directly or indirectly that some of these sisters who may be struggling with their son or with their children in church and need more services, and maybe that's just not the top 3, 5, or 8 priorities of their church, small or large? What would you put, what bug would you put in their ear, and how could they collaborate as a community within that church to get things done?
Ultimately, it's going to be no way around getting the pastor's participation. It's going to be no way around that if you're going to do it through the church. I'm a firm advocate. The church is not actively involved in the liberation of black children academically in the public and charter school system, then build an institution outside of the church. Back in 2016 in Baltimore, Maryland, we started the National Independent Black Parent Association, which is an organization that's now 6 years old that we founded to train parents and to also help them organize to build chapters, because we want to ultimately have a National Black Parents Association, which is what the organization is. And each chapter has 7 core committees. There's the Special Ed Committee to investigate special ed practices and special ed excesses in your school district. There's the Discipline Committee to investigate illegal suspensions and expulsions and punishments of black children. There's the Policy Committee to investigate racism in the school policies and decisions that they make. There's a Finance Committee to look at how school districts are spending their money. There's a Social Support Committee, parents who are struggling with food, domestic violence, hunger, homelessness, so forth and so on. And there's a Parent Advocacy Committee to make sure that when parents go to these meetings after school, that they're always accompanied by someone who's knowledgeable about policy and procedure, who can help them make good decisions in the moment. And so that's an organization that we've been working on for years. But I'll be quite honest with you guys, very few people have come forward to start chapters. They come and get the training for their child. They want to learn how to protect their child, but they never go back to their neighborhood and try to organize other parents so we could take care of our children.
Right.
And that's the shame, because selfishness is one of the greatest psychological weaknesses of the Black community. We care about ourselves. I remember reading an interview from one of the mothers of one of our children who were murdered by the police. It was one of the more popular cases, and I forget which case it was, but the mother said she had never been involved in activism. She had never been involved in protests. She really had not been involved in any form of community organizing until the police took her son's life. And unfortunately, that is true for most of us. Most Black people are so selfish, so concerned only about them and their family, that they do not get involved in grassroots organizations and grassroots efforts in our community until white supremacy comes knocking on their door.
Gotcha. Let's kind of talk about Black men. We talked a little bit earlier now about the role of fathers or Black men in the lives and the education of our young boys, and not particularly the father of those young men, but Black men in general, brothers who are out here on the hustle, brothers who have their own families, quite frankly, and they're struggling, trying to make sure that they're keeping their household and their young children intact. Tell us about what your thoughts are on how brothers, with and without families, can get involved, do something constructive, with, of course, not ending up in divorce and losing their wife and their family too.
Well, the thing is, number one, the best intervention is prevention.
Okay.
And so we as Black men have to make better decisions with our head and not with our hormones.
Right.
That's where it begins, because too often mothers and fathers, and of course I've spent a lot of my adult life being a therapist as well, and too often the foundation of the family is cracked because we never came together to build a family in the first place. The family was an accident of lust and physical intimacy. So as men, understanding that when we make poor decisions, it's going to impact the community, we definitely have to choose better mates. That's number one. Choose women who have the same vision and interest as you do, and stop letting your lust and physical attraction dictate the women that come into your life. And the same thing goes for women as well. But of course, I can also say that nobody is a psychic who can read the mind or the future changes that will take place in the mind of someone that they're dating. The woman you're with at 30 may not be the same woman at 50.
Right.
The woman at 70 may not be the same. So people change even when you do make good decisions. I think ultimately what matters most is whether we care enough about the children to make the right decision. And too often what I find is with mothers and fathers, the decisions involving our children are not made with the best interest of the children involved. It's about the best interest of the adults. You know, I've heard stories of fathers who said, hey, if I can't have you, I don't want the child either. I've heard stories of mothers who said, if I can't have you, you won't have your child either.
Yes.
You know, so we have a lot of selfishness. We have a lot of wounded souls walking around, bumping into other people and destroying their life because they haven't had enough willpower to take the time to face their own inner demons and work them out before they drop their dirty psychological baggage off on someone else's front steps.
Great points. And I want to remind our listeners out there tonight, feel free, please, to chat in your questions, your thoughts. You should have a call-in number below if you'd like to call in. Ask
Call in.
Dr. John. Absolutely. Please feel free to call in as well. We are about 25 minutes into the show. We still have a lot to talk about, but please, folks, join us and let's move forward. So we're talking about the family, the Black family. And, we talk about this all the time. When we look at the Black community, Black folk were more likely to be married than anybody else in this country up through the 70s. And then you have FDR. You have women's lib, you have a couple of things, and then slowly that began to unravel, and the Black man and the Black woman and the marriage rates in our community begin to slowly plummet. And now we're at a place where 75 some odd percent of our households are single female headed. When we look at the state of marriage in our communities, even with the churched folks in our communities, they're higher than any other group of people in this country. As a psychologist, what is it that you have seen that has happened over the last generation or two, and how do we begin to address that? Because that has a huge impact on our children, their education, their economic well-being, etc.
True. And it actually began in the 1970s. It was actually a byproduct of the American government's attempt to crush any opportunity for another Black power or civil rights movement to rise up after they assassinated Dr. King this coming Monday, April the 4th, 54 years ago in 1968. And so most Black revolutionary groups, activist groups, even mainstream integrationist groups like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference or Congress for Racial Equality, they were funded by Black people, because back then Black people had their own businesses. Most men were licensed tradesmen,
Yes.
because back then the high schools prepared you in the art of a trade so that you would be guaranteed to make a living after you graduate. So it was not unusual for a 17, 18-year-old Black boy just graduating from high school to graduate and go straight to the state board and sit for his electrician's license, his plumbing license, his HVAC license, his auto mechanic license, his welding license. So the first thing that the government did to break the economic back of the Black community to prevent the funding of another Black liberation struggle was they deindustrialized the inner city, which means they took out all the factories. That's when the factories started leaving. They start cutting the jobs, okay? Because before you could go to work right in your same neighborhood, okay? Right. That's when they really began to turn the Black community into a slum and into a ghetto. And at the same time, they went into the high schools and deindustrialized the high schools, which means they stripped them of all their meaningful industrial building trade programs. When I travel across the country now speaking, I always ask people, how many high schools do you have that a young man or woman can go and get the full training, not a few classes, the full curriculum required by your state for them to sit for their license after graduation? Almost none of them. No. And the white unions set it up that way, because this way the white labor union have a monopoly on who gets training. And if you have a monopoly on who gets training, you also have a monopoly on who gets hired. And unfortunately, our Black politicians are too afraid of the unions. Most of them are financed by the unions. I was looking at a list of Al Sharpton's donors, not to besmirch his character or anything at all, but I was looking at some of the organizations that donate to the National Action Network. And I found that Al Sharpton, he gets a lot of his organization funds from unions. And that's why Al Sharpton has never did anything about unemployment and Black men in New York City, because the unions pay him to basically stay out of it. And he's not the only one. You know, the white labor unions got a history of funding Black politicians so we don't do anything about their unfair and inequitable control of labor contracts, labor training, and labor jobs. So it's the deindustrialization of the Black community, which nobody has done anything about in 50 years.
Well, and plus the unions have rigged it where you can't even work on some of these job sites, especially public job sites, without being a part of the union. And since they control who joins the union, they can pretty much control who goes to work on these projects.
Exactly, which is another area of fighting. And I also believe that one of the reasons Dr. King was murdered 54 years ago, minus 1 week, is because his next fight was for economic justice.
Yes.
Dr. King's next fight was for economic justice. And what a lot of people overlook with regard to the timing of Dr. King's assassination was that the Kerner Commission report had just been released a few weeks before Dr. King's death. Now, the Kerner Commission report, ironically, ordered by President Lyndon Baines Johnson, would expose in honest form the reasons why there were so many rebellions in Black America in 1967, which was the long, hot summer. Then, of course, you had the Dr. King riots in 1968. And what the Kerner Commission found was that the ghettos of America were a white creation. The Black ghetto was a white creation, and the Kerner Commission concluded that racism created the ghetto, racism condones the ghetto, and racism maintains the ghetto. And when Lyndon Baines Johnson got that report, he refused to speak on it. He never officially validated it, because it basically exposed him and every presidential administration before him. Ironically, a presidential study exposed the inactivity of the president to look out for black people, and it necessitated Dr. King's assassination, because armed with the statistical data and the political analysis in the Kerner Commission report of 1968, they had to kill Dr. King. He would have been too powerful with that book in his hands as he set out to embark on his campaign for economic justice for black people. That book made it necessary for Dr. King to be taken away. He would have been too powerful. The Kerner Commission report gave Dr. King every ounce of information he needed to expound upon his premise that America was practicing economic apartheid against black people.
Very good point, and I appreciate you unpacking that. I have one question that came to me. You're familiar with Dr. Jawanta Kunjufu, correct?
Absolutely.
And of course, his book, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Men.
Yes, sir. We co-presented at a conference in Chicago, and he also purchased a copy of my book. And as a college undergrad at Millersville University, I probably read all of the Countering the Conspiracies as a freshman at Millersville University.
Have a colleague of mine, a listener, who asked, Dr. Umar, could you speak on the dilemma where black males are judged in their behavior, juxtaposed to the white female idea, placing them in special education and detention, as delineated in Kunjufu's Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Males?
All right. I'm going to give my analysis, not Dr. Kunjufu's
That's fine.
analysis.
That's what we want.
Okay, I'm a school psychologist. He's not a school psychologist. He's an educator. But I'm going to come from a school psychologist perspective. The fourth grade syndrome that Dr. Kunjufu spoke to occurs because it is precisely around the fourth grade when black boys start going through adolescence.
Okay.
It's when they get taller. It's when their voices get darker. It's when they start asserting themselves as young men, as opposed to the cute, cuddly little boys that these white teachers had to deal with from preschool to third grade.
Okay.
And it is precisely in the fourth and fifth grade where the white female teacher, who is the predominant school teacher in this country, which is the biggest part of the problem. Nobody talks about the race and the racism in the classroom teacher. They get a pass. White women get a pass. We talk about poverty. We talk about single mothers. We talk about hip hop, basketball, incarcerated fathers, black on black crime. We do not talk about the racism of America's white public school teachers. And we don't talk about it because they are a privileged population. And unfortunately, black leaders do not do enough of keeping the conversation focused on the racism of the teacher. Because in my 25 years of being in the field of education, that is the biggest problem at all. Switch out them white women for some strong black men, you solve half the problems overnight. But getting back to
Explain that.
Yes, sir.
That statement.
Now, let me make this point,
Sure.
and then I'm going to come right back to it.
Okay.
When that boy starts to become a man, that's when the teacher's biases, assumptions, stereotypes that she has about black men, they all get activated.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You see, and the black boy isn't used to being mistreated because he was being treated nice by this white teacher for 4 years. All of a sudden, he gets to fourth and fifth grade, and now he's public enemy number one. That's the issue, because the job of the white woman is to break the spirit of the black male child. Education is a buck-breaking process. It is a process of teaching the black boy his place. And there's no better person to teach a black boy his place in a white racist society than a white female. Because if a woman breaks the spirit of a man, he's twice broken. And that's the job of public education. Public education is akin to the slave-breaking plantations that we once had in the United States of America. If you was an unruly slave, if you didn't know your place in this society, there were certain slave masters that they would send you to certain plantations who specialized in the breaking of the slave. My ancestor Frederick Douglass was sent to a white man by the name of Stephen Covey, and it was Covey's job to break Frederick's spirit. But of course, Frederick ended up beating Covey up and then running away to his freedom. But nonetheless, the public school is the slave breaking plantation. That's where black boys get their spirit broke, and they're taught how to function in order to be successful in this white man's world.
What does that look like? I mean, because I mean, in a lot of cases, you're not thinking of a woman being able to break. I mean, obviously, if we look historically, black men were broken physically and psychologically as well by white men in slavery, in policing of our communities, in jails and prisons. But when we talk about the education system and young boys, what does this look like? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of parents are saying, well, you know, Miss Johnson, Miss Smith is nice. I mean, she's a lovely lady. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, she's nice while you're there.
Mm-hmm.
She's nice while you're there. When you're not there, that's a totally different woman. And the breaking ultimately, okay, can be seen unquestionably through the results of the educational system. Only 1 out of every 4 black boys graduate in this country. 1 out of 4. I read a statistic the other day. In most states, half the black boys in fourth grade, half the black boys in fourth grade cannot read on their grade level.
That's right.
Half the black boys in 8th grade cannot count on their grade level. So if the job of a man is to protect and provide, if the job of the man is to protect and provide, and the job of the school is to prepare you to protect and provide, if you had your education broken, you did not graduate, or you graduated functionally illiterate, which means you cannot perform your job as a man, I would argue that in and of itself constitutes a broken black male. And that's why we have the drug dealing we have. That's why we have the gangs we have. That's why we have the crime we have. Right now, black America is up in arms about its own young men terrorizing their own community. And they're doing that because we allow them to receive an education that we know is broken. And if the education is broken, he will be broken. Psychologically, emotionally, academically, and definitely economically. The unemployment of black men is a form of economic castration. As you said, they didn't physically remove the reproductive organ of the black man. They economically removed the reproductive organ of the black man. Black men in America are the only population who are out-educated and out-earned by their mate. We're the only ones whose women out-educate and out-earn us because we are a threat. And when you are a threat, you must be held in check, which is why I need people to understand that the dysfunctionality of American public schools is not an accident.
On purpose.
It is the result of deliberate intent. They do it on purpose.
Yes.
And why do they do it on purpose? In order to protect the white privilege of Caucasian boys and girls. In order to protect the white privilege of Caucasian boys and girls, you have to disadvantage the black boys and girls.
Thank you. It's about group survival, doctor. I mean, you're right. You can't be superior to someone unless there's someone that's inferior to you. So
absolutely.
And the black woman is a perfect tool because she's someone they can control. She's someone that they feel safe with. So they put her in charge. So you're right. Black women out-earn black men. I mean, black women are running the households. And the black men allow this to happen. So it's time that we now rise up and get these brothers back to the leadership position in their homes, their communities, and to save their children. If you're not doing that, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're worthless. You're the
well, here's the thing. The government is not going to play any role in that.
Right.
And this is where we as a community are at fault for our own Holocaust, because the economic Holocaust has become a physical Holocaust.
Yes.
Because when people cannot find work, they will kill in order to eat. So the economic Holocaust becomes a physical Holocaust. So here's the question. We are a $2 trillion people.
Yes.
2 trillion. That makes us the richest group of Africans in the world.
Yes.
And the 10th richest economic power on the earth. But when you look around, you don't see no black-owned hospitals, very few. Very few independent black-owned schools.
Right.
Very few truly independent and grassroots-minded black banks.
Right.
Because most of our independent black banks are capitalists. They're not trying to grow the black community. They're just trying to grow their own pockets. You see very few black supermarkets. You see almost no black distribution networks,
None.
almost no black manufacturing
That's
outlets
correct.
anywhere in this country. But at the same time, gentlemen, we spend $2 billion on Air Jordans, $4 billion on liquor, $30 billion on hair and beauty products, billions on video games, almost $800 million on chicken, turkey, beef, and pork. We are literally making European Jews rich, Mexicans rich, Arabs rich, Koreans and Chinese rich, Anglo-Saxons rich. But yet we're sitting around waiting for the government to give us reparations
Preach on,
when
brother.
you have more than enough money.
To take care of yourself.
I support reparations, but we can't use reparations as an excuse to not be economically responsible right now.
Okay.
Because if you're saying you can't do anything until the government gives you a check, you're putting the government in charge of your freedom and your progress and your liberation. Brothers, we have more than enough money in Black America to do what we need to do.
Thank you.
The problem is we have priority problems.
Okay, there we
As
go.
long as Creflo Dollar could get, what, a $30 million jet to fly around and preach, that's insane. These black megachurches are insane. These black politicians are cowards. Listen, every predominantly black city too has a predominantly black city council. Everyone. The distribution of municipal resources is largely controlled by black folks. And yet white people still dominate the economy.
How?
Because the politicians who get elected by black people are financed by the same white interests
It is true.
that are controlling the city. And this is why I do not vote for black politicians who are not independent candidates. If you are not independent, I will not vote for you. Democrat, you're not free. Republican, you're not free. You are obligated to the party line. And one of the reasons our Congressional Black Caucus, the 59 American Africans in D.C., are so docile and impotent and don't get nothing done for us is because most of them were financed by white interests. They got elected on white money. And the hand that pays is the hand that rules. So post-election, you can't even look out for your people because you sold your soul on the campaign trail.
True.
So, as a community, a $2 trillion community, as we've talked about before, the most prolific consumers and spenders in this country. And now we're getting to the topic and the theme, saving black people from black people. Our habits, there's an old saying, every dollar spent is a political statement made. Question being, folks, if we are not making decisions economically, politically, in our own interests, what else do you expect? And it's easy to point the finger at someone else, another group. But the reality of it is, Dr. Umar, what is it that we must do in order to change the narrative, change the future, change the next generation? And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we are very split on this issue. I would agree to your point. Everything is about self and my own interest. We're not looking at the next generation. Unlike our ancestors, our great parents, our great grandparents, and great great grandparents, they knew the things that they were doing and sacrificing for, they were not going to benefit from. But unfortunately, we have lost that memo. But when it comes to the economics, when it comes to the education of our own children, when it comes to how we are investing our money, it has to change for our outcome to change. Can you talk about that? How do black people save themselves from black people? Because what black people have not been doing has not been empowering black people.
Couple points. Point number one, we need to recognize a very important point. The current population of black people in this country right now, the 50 million, we are the most psychologically irresponsible, selfish, and non-progressive group of black folks that we've ever had in this country, 400 years. Since Dr. King, we have not worked together as a people to achieve anything of significance. I'm not talking about no one-day Million Man March. I'm not talking about no one-day Al Sharpton March. I'm not talking about no NAACP Urban League Get Out the Vote. I'm not talking about no black church protest. We have not done anything of significance in 54
Hold
years.
on, we got a
Okay,
caller.
and it looks like we do have a caller. Welcome to Black Men Speak. If you could tell us your name, where you're from, and what your question is.
Man, I'm Gregory Harrison, and what say you, my good brother? Definitely want to just give a chime in. My brother, I can't co-sign on some of the stuff you're saying right now. I'm going to tell you straight up, the stuff you're saying right now about the not voting for Democrat just because of whatever view you said is just absolute foolishness. I'm not going to say it any other way, but at the end of the day, you walking into the polls with a losing vote. You wasting your vote. I'm going to tell you that straight to you. You wasting your vote. There's no other way to say it. You know all these statistics. You know all these statistics. You give me the statistics of independents who won, and now we can talk.
Okay. First of all, control your emotions, brother. We having a dialogue. Control your emotions. Number two.
My emotions right in check. I just want to make sure we got the right thing.
Caller, be
I'm talking now.
respectful.
You listening?
Yeah, be respectful.
I'm talking now. You gonna listen? Name me one thing we got a significance from the Democrat, because we've been voting Democrat for 89 years since 1933. Give me something of significance that we've got in 89 years.
Okay, I'm gonna give you more than one.
I just want one.
So you're gonna call. So I'm assuming you're talking about the universal health care. You saying that's not for us, right?
No. Answer the question. Is your answer universal health care?
That is one. Not questionable over one.
Universal health care was for America. It was not for black people. What's your next one?
That is absolutely. I'm American.
Universal health care was for Americans. It was not for black people. I can name 4 laws.
I'm black. I'm American.
Can name 4 laws. I can name 4 laws that was just for homosexuals. I can name 4 laws that was just for women. I can name 3 laws that was just for immigrants. I can name a law that was just for transgenders. I can name 4 laws just for Asians. You can't name 1 law just for black people.
Sir, I thought you just asked me to control my time.
Just for black people.
Okay,
I get 1 law just for black people.
Wait, time out. We're going to do one at a time, Brother Harrington. Let him finish, and then we'll let you speak, and that way we can our audience can hear what both of you guys are saying.
Well, my question. Okay, my question is real direct and specific, and he didn't answer it because he doesn't have an answer. And that question is this: what law has been passed in recent times by Democrats that pertains exclusively to black people, as we've had a law passed exclusively for Asians? I can name 1 exclusively for Native Americans. I can name 4 exclusively for LGBT. I can name 1 exclusively for immigrants. I can name 3 exclusively for women. What law has been passed exclusively for black people? Healthcare is not a top 5 concern of the black community. A top 5 concern of the black community is miseducation, mass incarceration, economic devastation, police genocide, and access to wealth. Those are the big 5 major problems. If you poll black folks, they're going to give you miseducation, mass incarceration, gentrification, police genocide, and access to wealth. I'm going to go back to my question. Name a law that the Democrats gave us that was just for black people. Underline just for black people.
Well, Dr. Johnson, let me take a stab at it. This administration has spent $5 trillion, $6 trillion of money that we don't have. And of all that money that they spent, we're looking at $30 billion being taken away from HBCUs. So that's put into the budget law, specifically designed to target black people, black schools, while you give $100 million to Harvard, who has the largest endowment in the world for schools. So for folks who think that those Democrats are our friends, so yes, whatever they do pass, it's not anything that's good for us. So you're absolutely correct. Passing something for us doesn't happen. Passing something against us happens routinely.
All the time. And you have seen under Barack Obama and Joe Biden together, because you cannot separate Biden from Obama. Obama did nothing for black people either.
Nothing.
He also cut money for HBCUs
yes,
as
he did.
well.
Gave it to Latin schools.
Yes, he did. And again, you get these emotional Negroes who want to talk about how we got to keep voting for Democrats. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The Democratic agenda for black people is no different than the Republican agenda for black people. The only difference is the strategy and the tactic that they use. The Republicans are honest with their racism, and they believe that they have enough money to win elections without black votes. Democrats are the party of working class whites. They are the party of middle class whites, and they are the party of underclass whites. And because of that, they tend to need the black vote more than the Republicans do. But let me say this, the reason why they're bringing in record numbers of immigrants to America. Look at all the Afghan refugees America is taking, but they sent the Haitians back to Haiti. Look at all the Ukrainians they're
taking. Back into the water.
But here's what we need to understand as black folks. The Democratic Party is tired of being considered the party of black people because it's hurting their votes with middle of the road white voters. So one of the reasons they're bringing these immigrants in, and one of the reasons President Biden wants to fast track them to getting their U.S. citizenship is so they can replace you at the election booth. See, the Democrats are slowly changing the color of the people who vote Democrat because, simply speaking, having to advocate for black people is a hindrance of the Democratic Party. They're tired of it. And so they want to switch us out for immigrants at the voting booth.
That's exactly what's happening, Doctor. Back
Absolutely.
30 years ago, the census, Hispanics were 6 to 7% of the population. Now they're 17%, and we went
by
from
design.
We went from 12% maybe to 14% maybe, somewhere between 12 and 13%. So in 30 years, they can double their population while ours is barely grown. So what's wrong with this picture?
All right, we have about a little bit less than 10 minutes left. I think our caller fell off. He wants to come back in. Do call back. For those on the chat, do that in. Let's kind of talk about what black folks have to do for black folks to save black folks from black folks. Because, I mean, clearly speaking, the country is built on the foundation of the exploitation of black folks to build the economy. The Civil War was fought in order to maintain that by one group of people fighting with another group of people. Black folks understand, hopefully, some of them, at least who are conscious, that anything you get, everything we've gotten, we've had to die, bleed, and sweat for. But in terms of your point saying that this generation or the last two generations of folks have fallen off, have slid backwards, it has to change if we're going to get a different result. Let's talk about that. How do we save black people from black people for black people?
I think four things. Number one, black people have to divest from the Democratic and Republican Party and start voting, as I said earlier, for independent candidates that we finance. We will never get anywhere waiting for Democrats or Republicans to change anything. The George Floyd Police Accountability Act is still waiting in Congress, still has not been passed, even though a majority of the Senate is Democrats. You see, the Democrats do not care any more about black folks than anybody else. Last time I checked, it was a Democratic president who put more black men in prison than any president in American history, and his name is Bill Clinton, and we called him an honorary black. You see, so we have to get out of this mentality that Democrats are our friends. They are not our friends. Lyndon Baines Johnson actually gave birth to the police state in this country. Right after he signed the Civil Rights Bill, he also signed the Federal Police Assistance Act, which gave the ghetto police military-grade weapons, military-grade surveillance equipment, and all the resources that they need to kill black men and lock them up. But nobody paid attention to that because we were so busy celebrating the Civil Rights Bill. We have to find out who believes in black independence and who don't. That's it. Because if you believe in black independence, you believe in using your money, your energy, your resources to create an independent reality for black people. I didn't say separate. I said independent. Chinese are not separate, but they're independent. You see, European Jews are not separate, but they're independent. Arabs are not separate, but they're independent. Those of us who really believe in the Black Wall Street concept need to put our money where our mouth is and start building, because there's too much talking being done and not enough work is being done.
That's correct.
And we got to keep in mind that most black people don't want to be free. I want to say this, just like the brother who just called. He don't want to be free. He want to stay on that Democratic Party plantation. Most black people just want to be comfortable. They don't want freedom. They don't want liberation. They don't want independence. They want to be comfortable. And it is very dangerous for people who want to be free to coordinate themselves with people who just want to be comfortable. Because if you get involved in a struggle for liberation and you're struggling next to a brother who just want to be comfortable, If the white power structure offers him a job or a nice house, he will stab you in the back.
Yes.
So I want to make sure people know that I'm looking for independence. I'm not just looking to be comfortable. Most black people in America are psychologically defeated, like the previous caller, and they just want to be comfortable.
Good point.
What's number two? You mentioned four things. Let's make sure we got that right for everybody. What are the 4 points?
We got to separate those who want to be dependent from those who want to be independent.
Okay.
Because everybody's not coming for the freedom struggle. Let's be clear. There will always be Negroes who will side with the power structure. And I believe at this point in our sojourn in this country, we have more black people who will side with the power structure than with us. I really believe that. I really believe if you told people to pick a side right now, most black people would go to the power structure side. They would stand with the white power structure against their own people. I have no doubt about it. I have no doubt about it. Many are called, but few are chosen. So this will not be a utopia. Find the ones who are serious. And then number two, we got to organize. The most honorable Marcus Garvey said, we are in the condition we are in, not so much because of the color of our skin, but because of the fact that we do not organize ourselves. We are totally disorganized as a race. Look at us politically. We're not organized. We just go out and vote for Democrats. That's all we do. We just go out and vote for the white Democrats. We're not organized. We don't have our own caucuses. We don't have our own lobbying organizations. We don't have our own special action committees. We don't even have a political union. We're economically disorganized, politically disorganized. Our parents are disorganized. Look at how they treat our kids in the schools. Garvey said the greatest weapon used against the Negro is disorganization. Number three, if you're not going to put your money into the struggle, then it's a waste of time, because there will be no black power without the black dollar. There will be no black power without the black dollar. And that's why we're not getting anywhere, because everybody's talking about what we need to do. But how many of those people talking about what we need to do willing to put their own money towards getting it done?
Okay. Writing a check. Number 4.
Writing a check. And last but not least, we got to build our own schools for our children, because until we do, we're fighting a losing war. We are giving the best years of our children's minds to our enemy to condition their unconscious long term. No people who are serious about their future would give their children to the very people who enslaved their ancestors to prepare them for the rest of their life. And you know they're failing at the job. And you still send your kids.
So you talk about building your own schools. There are charter schools. There are home schools. I know you're building a school. What does that look like, just to make sure that people are clear?
Well, a charter school is a public school. It's an alternative public school that certain stakeholders petition the state, and they say, we can do a better job than you. Mm-hmm. And the state says, well, you know what? We're struggling. We're going to go ahead and give you a charter. We're going to give you some freedom to create your own curriculum and innovate the learning process. But we're only going to give you a couple years. If your test scores don't prove that you can do a better job than us, we might as well shut your charter school down and send the kids back to public school. So charter schools are totally under state and local public school oversight. They're not independent schools at all.
What about the homeschool programs? You have a lot of
homeschools are good, but there's no organization because every parent is doing their own thing. So although I think homeschools are a good band-aid, they're not a solution, because if you want to properly educate Black children, you have to educate them together as a group, because one of the most important things we have to learn how to do is work together. And we don't know how to work together. So educating kids at home where they're not given the opportunity to learn together and work together isn't going to leave us any better than where we are. They're still going to end up competing with each other, which is what Black people love to do, compete with each other.
Good deal. Good deal. So before we end, because we're right at the top of the hour, tell us a little bit about, because you're opening a school as well, correct?
Yes, sir. Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, Wilmington, Delaware. I want to invite all your listeners out to our second annual FDMG Festival. It'll be in Wilmington, Delaware at the school. They'll be able to go to fdmgfestival.com to register beginning May 1st. We have food, vendors, performers, giveaways, book bags for the kids, games for the kids. It's an event for the whole family. You can fly into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Wilmington, Delaware is in our backyard, 20 driving minutes from the Philadelphia International Airport to get to our front door.
And how do they find out about it? And what was the website to find out more about that?
fdmgfestival.com.
Okay.
And they'll be able to register beginning May 1st. And for those who want to donate to the school, they could get on a Cash App and donate at $FDMG School on the Cash App, or they can go to drumarjohnson.com and get the mail-in donation information, as well as the PayPal donation information. And if they need to reach me directly, especially regarding their children, they can reach me by phone or text message at 215-989-9858. Again, that's 215-989-9858.
And tell us about your books.
Black Parent Advocate, The Art of War for Dealing with America's Public and Charter School, can be purchased on the website, drumarjohnson.com, or any of my upcoming events. I'll be in Long Island, New York on the 16th, Levittown, Pennsylvania on the 7th. I'll be in Albany, Georgia on the 30th and the 1st of May. I'll be in San Diego, 20, LA, Malcolm X Day, May 21st, and I'll be at the Blessed Love Community Center also in LA on May the 22nd. And it looks like I'll be going to London, England, April the 25th.
Wow, okay.
Okay, Jimmy, any last words? I know we're at the top of the hour, and I know we are tight on time. We want to be respectful of Dr. Johnson's calendar. Any final thoughts?
I just want to tell Dr. Johnson that, probably on 97% of the stuff you talked about, we were probably in sync. But we were 100% aligned on the schools. So we have to do a much better job at taking care of our kids. And black men, it's time for us to step up, all of us. Whether you have children or not, it's all of our responsibility to make sure our black boys don't get left behind. I mean, this is a travesty as to what's going on. So keep up the good work, and whatever we can do, please come back in the future to tell us about the progress. And
Right.
I will look you up and make sure I send a check for the school to help you guys out. So, and in fact, we need more of it. Once you get that one built, come back and tell us how we can get more built.
Absolutely.
And do you have do you know when that school is going to be open, or a projected date yet?
I am totally at the mercy of the quality of the contractors that we can find.
Gotcha.
I hate to tell you, brothers, but black contractors have not been what we needed them to be. The school should have been done. But you know how contractors are. You give them a deposit, they don't finish the work, they run off with your money, they steal out your school. I can write a whole book just on the black contractors, brother.
Ouch.
It's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking.
Any specific areas of need out there for if there are some brothers and sisters out
Plumbing
there?
and HVAC, primarily.
HVAC and what else now?
HVAC, plumbing, and electric.
And if you have spare time that you can donate to the school, because this is very important, do it. Help this brother out. So if you have spare time and these skills and you can do the work, go donate a day, a few hours to help out.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Johnson, we're going to ask that you give us some closing comments, man. I hope this will not be the last time that you are talking with us.
I'll be back for sure.
Okay.
I would just say that the words of Frederick Douglass: no struggle, no progress. The man who wants to be free must himself strike the first blow. We got to do the work. Nobody's going to do it for us. Not Jesus, not Allah, not Buddha, not Joe Biden. If black people want to be free, black people have to free themselves.
True. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Jim, in the interest of time, I guess we will close out with the theme song, man, because I know we are past the hour now.
Yes, we are.
All right. Black power.